Please join us every week for a new episode of Understanding the Human Condition with Dr. James Flowers. Dr. Flowers and his most admired mentors, respected colleagues, and VIP guests will share valuable insight into underlying health causes, conditions, and issues. These in-depth yet approachable episodes are a great resource for both private individuals and industry professionals. Our esteemed host, Dr. James Flowers, is one of the most recognized and respected names in the field of chronic pain, mental health, and substance use disorders, both nationally and internationally. Dr. Flowers is the founder of J. Flowers Health Institute, located in Houston, Texas. For more information about J. Flowers Health Institute and its concierge services, go to jflowershealth.com or dial 713-783-6655. And be sure to mention this podcast.
Welcome to Understanding the Human Condition. I'm Robin French, and this is your host, Dr. James Flowers.
Thank you, Robin. It's good to be here. I'm so excited to have Heather Hayes today.
Our VIP guest.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is episode 6. So I thought I'd start out, if I could, by introducing her with a little bio here. Heather is the founder and CEO of Heather R. Hayes and Associates. She is a master-level licensed counselor, board-registered interventionist. A veteran of behavioral health field, she has over 30 years' experience working with addictions and other disorders and specializes in the treatment of adolescents, young adults, trauma, brain disorders, complex mental health issues, and a full spectrum of addictive disorders. Known as one of the country's most prominent authorities on these topics, Heather is a coveted speaker and has been published in numerous journals, books, and industry publications. Heather serves as an on-air expert and consultant for CNN, Dr. Oz, and has been featured on all the major networks and as a featured interventionist on A&E's high-profile show, Intervention. Outside of her practice, Heather uses her expertise to give back to her community as a volunteer psychological profiler with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department Hostage Negotiation and SWAT team. Heather is currently writing a book, Our Youth Taken Hostage. And so I thought we'd dive right in and talk about that, because I watched a clip yesterday of you. You were speaking with Clay Weaver. I think it was on your website.
Yeah.
And there were some staggering statistics on there that you were mentioning that 2,500 teenagers a day try a prescription pill for the first time to get high. In fact, 1 in 7 have done so in the last year, and that 60% of them are 15 years or younger, and that our children are more likely to die from an overdose than anything else that we prepare them for in schools. Mm-hmm. We teach fire prevention, how to prepare for a shooter or a terrorist attack, and yet we aren't teaching our families and children about this. So thanks for bringing it to everyone's attention.
Yeah.
It's something I feel very passionate about. And part of it, too, is I sat through negotiator training. I was approached by my county's sheriff department in 2001, and they asked me if I wanted to become part of the team. Like the team's now, back then it started incorporating mental health professionals onto the team for when they have hostage call-outs. So I sat through negotiations training with the FBI, with some of NYPD's finest. And as I sat there hearing them talk about all the principles of negotiation and terrorism, everything connected with what we deal with addiction, how the brain is taken hostage, how the individuals are taken hostage, how the families are taken hostage, and almost develop like Stockholm syndrome. Mm-hmm. And I began to wonder and really think about what we're doing as a society to look at what we propagate and what, the messaging that we're giving with stigma. And it struck me one day, we come in and we teach our children how to, we have tornado drills, we have fire drills, we have active shooter drills, and yet our children are more likely to be killed by a drug overdose than a fire or a tornado or a terror attack. Not to say we don't need those trainings, of course we do. But what is it in our society that's keeping us from really talking about how one of the biggest terrorists we have is addiction? And it's like we have these little sleeper cells all in our homes. And yet, if we truly had a sleeper cell in our neighborhood, we would be all over it. Mm-hmm. And the media would take over, and we would really handle it in a way that I believe we've handled COVID-19. Mm-hmm. Like there is a huge threat amongst us. Yeah. And yet we have, again, close to 200 people a day dying just from opiate overdose.
Sad.
We have our teenagers, our children, exposed at a young age to drugs and alcohol for the first time. We know today who are at risk. We know who's at risk. We know our statistics for reports to Department of Child and Family Services. We know trauma is involved. We know the genetic component. And yet we're not doing a good job of really coming in and educating our parents and our families at how do you begin talking to your children about this at the dinner table?
Yeah.
That's where it really begins.
And is that the intent of the new book, Heather, to get this in the hands of every parent and school in the country?
Yeah. Every parent, every school, and the professionals, and to really look at, again, talking about the human condition. What are our goals for young adults? Like, what do our children need? What are the developmental milestones, like connection, socialization, being able to master things to help build their self-esteem, creativity, interaction with the outdoors, healthy diet and sleep? What are the things that we need to help our teenagers grow as children, become healthy teenagers, and be able to launch into adulthood so that they come into adulthood knowing like how to make meaning out of life, what their passion is, and really define, what's my purpose.
That's right.
Adolescent years, I got sober when I was 21. So what that means is the majority of my addiction was that of a teenager, young adult.
Sure.
And I think back to the times, the only way I can describe adolescence for me, and I think for a lot of other teenagers out there, is it was just like existential angst. Like my really spending time I was so sensitive, trying to sort out like, why is the world like it is? Why is there so much pain? Why is there so much hurt? Why are people bad to, mean? Why is there bullying? Why am I bullied? Why do I see it? All of those issues, coupled with how can there be so much beauty in the world and love and joy? And for me, I was a competitive rider. I've always had my horses. So I had that love in there too, but trying to sort it all out was near impossible.
Sure.
And so I found, I was just primed at 13 when I had my first drink for my dopamine system to go, ding, ding, ding.
I love this.
Relax, sense of well-being.
Yep.
And I went, oh, I'm not shy anymore. I don't feel awkward. Like off to the races. So how do we help our teenagers with that? It's hard being a teenager. It's hard living in this world. And we now live in a world where, for example, when I was a teenager, I turned on the TV and, the news was, some guy reporting.
Right.
Now, even the exposure that our kids live with, having to turn on the TV and to see, again, terror attacks live and getting on the internet and the availability of the dark web where you can watch horrific acts happen. That's traumatizing.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a different world. I've often said, never in my day did I think that someone was going to walk into the Lovett School where I went and with a gun and shoot somebody.
Right.
And today, our children, we have active shooter drills for them because it's reality. So
it's just amazing.
It's hard, the human condition.
Yeah.
To me, the human condition means, how do I make sense out of this world in which I live? How do I find meaning? And how do I do it at every level and step of my life? How do I, as a young adult, make sense out of it and still not be able to think clearly or have the wisdom? And then how do I trust the adults that are telling me and teaching me? That's hard for kids to sometimes find safe people that they trust. And then now at this phase of my life, there comes a point where I was always looking forward. What's my next career move? What am I going to do? Then there comes this time now where looking forward going, how many more years? How many? Right. Not that I'm planning to,
You're not going anywhere.
Hire anytime soon. But there's also that phase that Eric Erickson talked about where you stop and you go, okay, here I am.
Yep.
Now I'm looking back at what I've done in my career. What would I have done differently? What do I wish I hadn't done. How do I resolve that in myself? How do I take what I've got now and pass that on? So,
that's right.
We're always looking in some direction while taking it a day at a time.
Absolutely.
Trying to make meaning and
purpose.
Really existential sense out of it all.
That's right. Well, and I think that you, Heather, certainly exemplify that in our country, in the addiction world, as a role model, as a person in long-term recovery, as an interventionist, and you just exude that all day long, every day. And so thank you for what you're doing out there. I wanted to ask, so I see a #1 New York Times bestseller about to come out. When is your book going to come out, do you think?
Well, I had hoped that I would have it to press now. And I actually had this whole thought process. I mean, I've got like the first manuscript's done.
Great.
I'm type A. So it's never going to be as good as I want it to be. So there'll come a point where I have to say, quit writing on it.
A little bit of that OCD there.
A little bit of that OCD, a little bit of that perfectionist. My father published over 300 books, manuscripts, so it's kind of in my blood.
Yep.
But I had hoped during COVID, I thought, okay, great. Not that we're still in COVID, but we had the big lockdown. I thought, okay, I'm going to work on the book. But, I found that lockdown exhausting. So I am, I hope to have it out. I would venture to say, hopefully, the beginning of next year.
Wonderful.
I can tell you, one of the other things that I've tried to do recently is to put out a new blog every week.
Yeah.
And so there are pieces of the blogs that I put out that have been kind of tests where I've taken a piece of of my book, written about it a little bit more, and put it out on a blog. So every Sunday there's a new blog coming out. And it's kind of part of my, when you talk about giving meaning, there was a time maybe about 10 years ago, maybe 15, maybe 20, where all of a sudden I realized I was the age of the people that I looked up to.
Right.
In my career, when I had first started out, I was studying psychology when I went to treatment and got into recovery. So I just kept going.
Right.
And so I remember there were many people that I just looked up to. And suddenly I went, I'm kind of that age now, and I've been doing it for a long time. And so it also brought upon me, under the guise of making meaning of my life, a drive to also pass on what I've learned over the years.
Absolutely.
By doing that, by blogs, by, speaking, and a big part of that's my book.
How can the audience find your blogs every Sunday?
So I put them out on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Then I attach them to my website.
Excellent.
But I have a Facebook page, Heather R. Hayes and Associates. I have an Instagram page that's also Heather R. Hayes and Associates. I have a Twitter page, a LinkedIn page. And so every week on Sundays, they go out on there. And then I link them to my website so that people can come and look at them if they want to, or look things up.
Sure.
I also put together a packet for communities to answer a lot of different questions. Over the years, I've been blessed to have worked with some amazing families who've really been my teachers and helped me become really who I am today. And I had some mothers reach out to me and say, will you help us put together questions, answers to questions like, well, why do we tell our kids they can't smoke marijuana? Or why is it bad for a teenager to put alcohol and drugs on top of an immature, undeveloped brain? Or, why is it that we have to now, why are grandparents smoking pot? All these different
exactly. Yeah.
So I put together sort of a community packet too, that people can take to their communities, to have to their places of worship, wherever, that answer a lot of these questions that parents will often ask.
And I saw that last night that Forsyth County lit the county town square, I'm guessing, in purple for Overdose Awareness Month. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure you had something to do with that.
Absolutely. This is the 4th year where I've gone to the county commissioners and asked them to declare a proclamation of the August 31st being International Overdose Awareness Day. And I've done that in conjunction. There's some mothers here. I really think that the changes that we're seeing today in government and legislation and ending stigma are coming from the mothers and family members who have lost children to addiction or have children who are addicted. I mean, those are really our warriors. And so we have a group of mothers here who've also lost their children to addiction. So together, my county is incredible. We do a lot of education, but we have a mother that put together and has for the last 4 years a teacup vigils. So they're teacups that have candles in them, and they're attached to family members from all over the country can write to her, and she'll have a teacup with their name on it and their birth date and the day they left this world, and then pictures of them. It's just so moving. Yeah. And part of that, our commissioners agreed to light up our downtown in purple. So. Yeah.
You know, my sister died of both a drug overdose and then fell the night she overdosed off of an 8-story building. And I wish that my mother so much had someone like you to reach out and find help. What advice would you give moms and dads and families when they have a child with addiction and they're seeking? You and I have worked together with as an interventionist and a provider before, but I really want the audience to hear about Heather R. Hayes and Associates and what you offer really the world in seeking treatment and how to talk to their loved ones about either an intervention or what you do with parents.
Absolutely. Well, first off, we live in a world today where it's so much more dangerous. I mean, there's so many family members where their children didn't even have addiction, but they reach out and they take one fake Xanax that's got fentanyl in it, or they do cocaine for the first time and it's got fentanyl in it. So the deaths are, I mean, it's just so painful to see how many kids that we're losing. So I don't think that there's room to really guess. I mean, there was a time where we might give the advice, I might have given the advice, gather more information, let's see what's happening. But I believe today in this climate with all the overdoses, that if you suspect there's a problem with your child, if you think that they're using, if you find drugs, you need to act and act quickly and seriously. And again, part of that begins with learning how to talk to your children so that they understand that this is a disease and that there is no disgrace in having this illness.
That's right.
So parents have got to educate themselves. They've got to get beyond the whole, not my kid, it's somebody else's kid, and realize that it happens to your, it can be your kid. And to really understand how to, we need to help educate the communities on what to look for.
Right.
But when parents begin to suspect, don't guess, don't say, I don't think it's that bad, I've only seen it one time. Get to a professional, get a good evaluation, hair testing, drug testing. There are ways that we can really look and see, how advanced are things.
That's right.
So when someone calls us, there are a lot of different ways that we'll work together. I feel like, this part of my career, I'm really at a place where I'm offering the families I work with the best of everything that I can pull together in all my years of knowledge of what we need to really help support a family with mental health or addiction issues.
Absolutely.
Some families come to us and they're ready to do an intervention. And again, we talk about the different styles of intervention. We talk about, again, my philosophy that it's not an ambush. It's not a dirty laundry list of everything that's wrong. We want to come in and really speak to everything that's right about that person, why they're a valuable family member, why we as an entire family need to do our own work to help support. And that's the message, that our identified patient is not just the person with the mental health issue or the addiction. Our identified patient is the entire family system, and that everyone's got work to do and learning to do. And some families will come in and do the intervention first. We work with families for a minimum of 6 months. I have marriage and family therapists on my staff that do nothing but work with the family during this time while supporting them, while they're also getting the family program and other things that are offered by treatment. We have some families that come in and they're not quite ready, so we begin that family work ahead of time and get them more empowered, get them making different decisions, handling, the family dynamics differently. So sometimes we end up coming in and doing an intervention, and sometimes by the family changing and shifting, their loved one ends up going and getting help.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's beautiful. And then we try and come in and, we also offer a lot of other services to help families. I developed a model of adolescent transport that's very trauma informed. It was important for me working with adolescents through a majority of my career to not come in and to have adolescents snatched out of bed in the middle of the night and sent off while the parents aren't at home. For us to really, we're going to come in and say the whole family system needs to do their work. You don't want to begin that by having parents say, take my kid and go fix him. We sit down, we have the family talk about everything they love about their loved one. Safety measures are still in place so they can't run, but really, here's why we made this decision. So they get to treatment in a way that's safe, respectful, and can be as untraumatic as possible. So
you and I both know so many families that have had someone come in the middle of the night and take their child and put them in a van and take them off to treatment. And just as you were speaking, thinking back, I can think of 8 or 10 or 12 families that I've worked with that unfortunately that's the way they did it. And I've never really seen it work successfully. I just never have. So I'm so glad that you developed this new, not new technique, but this technique that you've been using, and share that. I hope part of that's in your book too.
It is.
Why don't you talk just a little bit, if you don't mind, Heather, about your own journey? When you said you got sober when you were 21, how did that happen? What was the impetus for that, and what was that journey like for you?
So, so I grew up in a family that was very, I have to start there. I think the ground was set for me before I even, was born.
Right.
Came in, and I was born in a family where I had, a father who had grown up on Tobacco Road and a mother who grew up in the aristocratic South.
Right.
So they get married.
Yeah.
And, my father, hardworking, scholarship, was a Fulbright scholar over in Scotland, Princeton graduate. But his roots, his work was also in where he had come from. So had a lot of really mixed messages growing up. There was a lot of, my parents divorced and remarried each other 3 times. So it was a little bit chaotic.
Mine did twice, by the way. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. You don't hear that often. No. But, and I had rheumatic fever as a child.
Yeah.
So there was a whole year of my younger life where I was in bed, and there was all this drama around, don't get out of bed or you're going to get heart damage and die.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so my mom would come in the room and I'd be jumping on the bed and she'd freak out, and I'd go, you just said I couldn't get out of the bed.
Right.
I'm still in the bed, So trying to, tame all that energy. But, again, adolescence was hard. And as soon as I hit adolescence, puberty, and I was awkward, I was shy. And the first time I had that drink, I suddenly wasn't anymore. Right. And I said, I will do this as much as I possibly can. And it quickly escalated. I went to I went to some of the best private schools in the South. I was asked not to return to some of the best private schools in the South, and then transferred to some of the other. There were a lot of red flags along the way.
Sure. That
I was a teenager in distress. And I went off to the University of Georgia. I actually ran away from home. I ran away from home when I was a kid. And I can understand, this is part of why I think that tough love piece, kick them out of the house, sometimes it works great and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like I, was gone for 6 months, and they held on to, I'm not going to come get, they didn't kick me out. I'm like, goodbye.
I'm leaving. Yep.
And so, resilient. And I lived on my own, and I, did what I needed to do. And so I wasn't coming back. Like that didn't work, for me. But anyway, I did. What got me back is that somehow inside I knew I wanted to go to college. So I came back and said, I'll act right or behave.
Sure.
So it sent me to University of Georgia, which was a disaster. I went to the wrong class for the first half of a semester, not much. the professor handed out the exam, and I went up and corrected him in my helpful way to let him know he put the wrong number on it.
Of course
he was
did.
He was like, I know where I'm at. I think you're confused. So I got a D in the class he added me to, an F in the one I didn't go to. It was just a mess. Car wrecks, blackouts, But for me, the biggest thing I believe, as a woman in particular, was that loss of, I didn't get arrested. I didn't, I had bad grades. It was the internal, like the loss of myself and my self-esteem. And somewhere in there, I knew that my life was not to be what it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't to be, I'm going to fail out of school. I'm going to stay high all the time. And my tolerance level was unbelievable. I mean, my daily dose was, I would drink a quart of vodka over the course of the day. I would take 3 or 4 hits of speed in the morning to get going, smoke pot all day. Again, the day started about 4 in the afternoon.
Right.
But, would take like 8 or 10 Quaaludes, do 3 or 4 grams of cocaine. I mean, this was all in a day.
Right.
So and I had always been super, super, super thin. Just, I'd always had this fast metabolism. So, in hindsight, I don't know how I didn't.
Right.
For divine intervention, didn't overdose and die.
Yeah.
But I reached out and I asked, there were a few times where I'd kind of asked for help and it had fallen on deaf ears, and somehow, some grace, I had seen my parents had taken me to therapists since I was 12, saying, what's wrong with her? And there was this one guy that I kind of liked that I went to go see. That was the agreement when I had run away from home and was going to come back. And so little did I know he was in recovery.
Wow.
So one day, it was my 3rd year of school, I said to my friends as I was getting sick, throwing up, drunk, that's it, I'm going to rehab tomorrow. And they told me to go sleep it off. And I picked up the phone and called him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the rest is all she wrote. History. Now
Now
we're going to have a New York Times bestseller, I feel, next year.
You're paying it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does someone reach you, and how does someone reach Heather Hayes and Associates when they need help?
Probably the best way to reach would be just to go to the website, which is www.heatherhayes.com.
Yep.
And all the information's on there. And we have an 800 number. My team, we take turns. For me, my self-care is important. The self-care of my team is important. It's an easy burnout position being on the front line. So we try and take turns with who answers that phone. But when you call that 800 number, it'll either be answered by one of my team, or you'll get a call back right away if they're on the phone with another family. So. And
I'll tell you what, I've called that number many times, and they answer on the first ring, always, and they return calls right away if they're not able to. And I've certainly enjoyed working with you over the years, Heather, and I'm so honored to have you on our podcast today.
Thank you.
Everyone reach out to Heather R. Hayes and Associates in Georgia. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity for you guys to hear Heather's story. Buy her book when it comes out early next year, and thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you for everything you do, too. What you do is so important in helping families get the right, appropriate care for their loved ones, because it takes a lot for someone to reach out, go through that process. And then if they end up in the wrong place because they didn't have the right diagnosis, it's so discouraging for families.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Thank you, Heather, so much.
Thank you. And Dr. Flowers, how do they reach the J. Flowers Health Institute?
I think the easiest way, just like Heather said, is www.jflowershealth.com. Our phone number is 713-783-6655, but that website has lots of information on it. So check out both Heather Hayes' website, our website. We're both here to answer questions for you guys anytime. So Heather, thanks, and I hope to see you post-COVID very, very soon.
Thank you.
See you soon. Thank you.
Take good care.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome.